Good afternoon. And welcome to the 3 o'clock panel, Facility and Infrastructure Defense. I'm not Don Thomas. My name is Austin Gibbons. I'm Associate Professor of Cybersecurity at Utica University in New York. I'm the author of 2 books with our illustrious host, Nathan Bush, the most recent of which is titled Homeland Security: An Introduction, which was published in 2021 by Oxford University Press. Can we get my mic hot, please, Booth? Is that okay? Is it on now? It's on.
I think you're hot now.
Very good. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to introduce our panelists. Then I'm going to toss it over to them to speak a bit more about who they are and what they do within their respective organizations. I have a series of prepared questions that we're going to toss to the panel itself, and then we'll open it up to all of you. So without further ado, let me pull up my notes. To my immediate left is Kieran Carroll, Chief Strategy Officer at Zero Eyes. Mr. Carroll came to Zero Eyes from PricewaterhouseCoopers advisory practice in the telecommunications, financial services, and healthcare industries. Previously a naval officer, Carroll led cross-functional teams at various special operations forces and intelligence community organizations. To my second left is Mr. Tony Harrison, Region Energy Program Manager for the United States Department of the Navy. A retired Navy Senior Chief Engineman, Tony has over 20 years of experience in energy management, green technology, and project management. He has led significant mechanical system troubleshooting and engineering initiatives and is skilled in risk assessment, process optimization, and sustainable solutions. Down at the end of the table is Mr. Tom Chadwick, Director of Physical Security and Aviation at Dominion Energy. Tom Chadwick oversees security, unmanned systems, corporate travel, and aviation. He joined Dominion in 2019 after 22 years with the FBI, where he served as Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Richmond Division and led the International Corruption Unit. Please join me in welcoming our panel. So at this point, I'll pass it over to the panelists themselves to tell you a bit more about themselves and their respective roles within their organizations. Kieran?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks everyone for having me. This is a great opportunity. Kieran Carroll, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Zero Eyes. Zero Eyes is a Series B tech startup that operates in the computer vision space. We build sort of mission critical capability for both public safety and defense. We're very well known for our commercial firearm recognition solutions. This is a software that's going to integrate to existing security cameras and detect a visible brandished firearm. We operate heavily within the SLED space, so K through 12, higher education, state and local, but also in the commercial enterprise space. So we have numerous Fortune 500 customers. And then we have a separate defense business that's building sort of higher level capability, particularly for computer vision solutions around threat detection, anomaly detection. We have customers like the Army, the Air Force, SOCOM, and now we're starting to work more and more with federal agencies. The company's based right outside of Philadelphia, about 200 employees, about 70% of the company's a military veteran. So you can get a sense of who we hire. We hire for very mission critical roles. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for having me here, and I'm glad to be here to share some information about where we are with the Navy. In my role as a Regional Energy Program Manager, I work for Regional Commander and who works for Command Naval Installation Command. And I, for the Regional Commander, help set strategy for reducing energy at our installations in the Hampton Roads area and our remote installations in the region that extends from Maine all the way to Mechanicsburg. And in that role, again, what we're doing is, again, we see the mandates and we are developing innovative strategies, looking outside of the box to get, energy missions or critical missions gaps mitigated because of the fact that we see constrained funding. And you can see constrained funding all over. And so what I do is help the installations help achieve those goals where we can by optimizing friendships and optimization.
Yeah, Tom Chadwick, Director of Physical Security and Aviation at Dominion Energy. I love this institution. I've spent a fair amount of time down here, especially about 6 years ago when a significant amount of the Chadwick family revenue stream was coming to this institution. So I think I own a row or two. I don't know if my name's on it. It certainly should be. But yeah, my second child went here, played lacrosse for 4 years, graduated with an accounting degree, got her CPA, and then most importantly, got very quick gainful employment, which is always, as a father, you always appreciate that. Yeah, I came to Dominion Energy in 2019 after retiring from the FBI. I'm a mission guy. I got to feel like what I'm doing when I get up in the morning and go to work means something. And to me, there was really nothing more important than playing a small part in protecting really what is the lifeblood of our society in the generation, transmission, distribution of electricity. When I came to Dominion Energy in 2019, it was a bit larger. We had about 25,000 employees, I think, at the time, and we're in probably 22 or 23 states. We had just bought SCANA, which was the electric company in South Carolina, covered probably better than 50% of the electric production down there. And then over the last several years, the company's divested a good amount, which has been interesting to divest, sort of take on security assets and then divest those security assets, but has really become kind of a pure play regulated electricity focus. So now we're at, I think, 3.6 million customers, and we're about 14,000 employees. It's my goal to make Dominion's number one core value is safety. It's my intention, and we've been trying for a while to make every single one of those 14,000 people as focused on safety as they are on security. So I have the physical security program at Dominion, which covers, all the sort of more traditional things you would think about physical security. But we've had a very concerted effort to kind of take the program from typical guards, gates, and guns to a more sophisticated physical security operation. And in the last couple of years, took on our aviation, our burgeoning unmanned systems group, and travel services. You might think, well, gosh, what is the kind of synergy with security there? And I maybe thought that initially, but there's actually a lot of tethering. When you're flying your executives around the world, a tethering to your executive protection unit and team makes a whole lot of sense. When you're using drones as a force multiplier, but also realizing that they're a threat multiplier, that makes sense as a tethering to security. When your people are traveling all over the country and all over the world, having systems in place that make them aware of threats of any kind when they're traveling so that they can be aware makes a lot of sense too. So as it turns out, having aviation travel services is a very logical connection to physical security.
I appreciate that. So for our first question, what I'd like to do is start at the end of the table with Tom and move toward me, please. So what does energy security mean to you in terms of developing and maintaining facility and infrastructure defense? Tom?
Yeah, so Dominion Energy's byline and focus is reliable, affordable, increasingly clean energy. I know for most of my life, I never thought about it. I'd walk into the room, I'd flip the switch, and the lights went on. And that's what we want. But our mission in security, and specifically in the physical security side, is to protect the people, assets, and operations of Dominion Energy, to protect that $100 billion or whatever it might be today in assets that generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. So when I think about what that means to us, no matter how big your company is or small your company is, there's always limited time, resources, money, et cetera. So I tend to think of things in terms of mission, strategy, and tactics. So I gave you our mission. Our mission is to protect the people, assets, and operation of Dominion Energy in service to our customers and community. But when it comes to strategy, what we did, and I pilfered this from the FBI unabashedly, I'll say it, the FBI had a process called threat review and prioritization. You can't really, for many years, the FBI had just sort of a top 10 list, not the folks that are in the post office, but the folks, but a process of sort of racking and stacking the threats. So counterintelligence might be number one, counterterrorism might be number two, public corruption might be number three. But they realized that's not a very sophisticated, process for assessing threats. And they went to more of a banding of threats that looked at the threat, the impact, the likelihood, and the mitigation. So we sort of stole that in a sense and have implemented that at Dominion Energy. The first couple years, the knuckle dragon crim agent tried to do it, and then ultimately I turned it over to Jonathan Bransky, our 100-pound brain, who went to Cornell. I mean, the rest of us went to state school, so we turned it over to the smart guy, and they've really taken it to the next level. We're doing that. We're looking at the threats. We get all of our folks around a table, our investigators, our folks that are designing our security apparatus at substations, our intel folks, our cyber folks, and we look at the threats that are out there. We look at the impact of those threats, the likelihood of those threats, the mitigations we have in place, and we essentially create a heat map that helps us assess what those threats look like to Dominion Energy and to the bulk electric system. Then we're all sort of singing out of the same hymn book in terms of what we're trying to address. And from next step down is we look at tactics. And these are really like, what are our core initiatives? How are we going to implement that strategy with the things we're going to do this year or next year, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how I think about, protecting our assets and protecting the energy.
Very good. Tony?
So in my perspective, and in my role as Regional Energy Program Manager for Command Navy Region Mid-Atlantic, what we look at is, for energy security, looking at shoring vulnerabilities at our facilities and our bases. As you might note, all of our installations are not created equal, and all of our facilities are not created equal. We have to prioritize, again, based on mission assurance assessment, mission criticality, and mission dependency index. And all of those measures and those metrics we use to prioritize what needs to be secure and what risks are we able to manage, what risks are we able to say, okay, we need to show up. And so from that perspective, we look at energy security. We focus on three pillars: energy resiliency, energy reliability, and energy conservation. We're still in the business about reducing energy where we can, but we don't want that to impact mission requirements. If my op tempo says I need to use more energy, I want it to be using the most energy, but in the most efficient manner. Reliability, I'm looking at something that's reliable. I'm looking at resiliency, I'm being able to respond just in case I get bad actors or my cyber hygiene is penetrated. So again, we're looking at that from energy security. We're looking at shoring up our vulnerabilities at our facilities and our installations.
Kieran?
Yeah, so I think I'm hearing a couple recurring themes, and the first one is funding. Funding is always in jeopardy, no matter where you go, what side of the government you're on. If you're in private industry, particularly for security, as is always going to be a cost center. Zero-Eyes, we're a vendor, so I like to think of ourselves as we jump in and help solve problems based on requirements generated by customers. And the really typical ones that we're seeing right now in the broader energy industry is largely going to be, how do we leverage computer vision to help solve efficiency issues within the workforce? These are largely manual security operations that happen both within government and in private sector for the longest time. Well, now we have camera-based systems that can do a large piece of the manual workflows that used to happen. And this is really where Zero-Eyes comes in on the security side. So, we provide a large number of different threat classifiers and threat analytics, both for static cameras and also for drones. The security space has been a pioneer, the energy space has been a pioneer of using drones to replace really dirty and dangerous jobs that humans used to do for things like inspections, right? And we're looking to upskill some of those drone capabilities with an additional security layer to add to their repertoire. I think the largest piece that we're seeing sort of on the vendor side of this industry is that as AI, computer vision, LLM, as this capability propagates, we're going to see huge efficiencies within the workforce. The security industry, the security side of those businesses will absolutely be affected. And I think almost double for the government. The government, as a former government guy, I think I can say this, the government used to throw bodies at these problems. And the reality is that these bodies just don't exist anymore. So we have to get smarter and faster and more efficient. And the only sort of logical and cost-effective way to do that is leveraging some sort of technology.
Very good. So this next question I'm going to pitch to Tom and Tony. What are your top concerns when you think about securing the operational technology our electric systems rely on? Let's go to Tony maybe first and then Tom.
So what I look for, again, I'm looking at, my facility, risk management. So I have to look at, if I got a facility, there are certain things I need. I need power, thanks to Dominion. I need water, thanks to my local water provider, to do my mission. And if there's a critical function going on in that particular building, I need to make sure that all the measures that could be thought of are considered. And I have to manage that risk, making sure that there are isolation valves, or if there is a backup to certain systems. For instance, my HVAC system, if there is a loss of water, whatever, I need to have something resilient, a tank of some sort. We're looking at that for critical facilities. So again, that hasn't been our posture in the past, but these are some of the things that we're finding out that we have to do now. We're operating in stranger territories, stranger days. And so we had to really factor those in and look at that risk management, the operational risk management, where we can employ that specific technology or any kind of technology that's going to help us mitigate the risk where it's feasible.
Yeah, operational technology. I'm not a cyber guy. I'm a civil engineer, so think roads and commodes. Not electrons flowing or cyber. But when I think about operational technology, SCADA systems, industrial control systems, I worked for a couple years as a plant engineer, and I think about those systems that ran those plants and the things that could potentially go wrong if those systems went bad. The plant I worked at one point, it was a chemical pigments plant. And they used ball mills to make this pigment. And at one point, they cracked the head of the ball mill to open it up, and there was an explosive mixture in there. It exploded and killed 2 people. So, and that's a very safety-oriented culture. You can imagine the things that could go wrong if adversaries were able to get into some of these operational technology networks. I know for us, that is space. I'm thinking we had an LNG plant for a long period of time, big OT environment. And, our cyber teams, our security teams, plant personnel all working together to make sure that access to those systems was highly controlled. If you were a vendor, if you were a contractor, an employee, if you're, upgrading a software, firmware, or something like that, there was an immense amount of controls that went around that upgrade and that updating process. And they were kind of isolated networks in and of themselves, not part, obviously, of our IT network, our business network. Again, I'm not an expert in this space, but from, in terms of our client, we're trying to establish and provide the electricity and the resiliency you need so that you can continue operations. But as far as the security of the OT networks themselves, I think it's all about controlling access into those systems in a very effective way.
Good. This next question is for you, Kieran. What should be our top concerns when we think about physical security of our energy facilities and infrastructure?
Yeah, so I'll preface this by saying I'm not an expert in any mean on the threat picture within energy. I can tell you from our perspective and answering customer requirements, and I think that most people in this room would agree that largely the threat picture has changed over the last decade or so here in the United States. Right now, Zero Eyes gets asked probably more frequently for our drone detection solution when it comes to providing capability for critical infrastructure. And if you guys are at all paying attention to what's going on in Ukraine, the ability for really just anybody to go procure a small FPV drone for several $100s and put some sort of homemade explosive device on it is pretty terrifying, not just for energy, I think, but also for critical infrastructure writ large. So we were starting to see a shift within both government and also sort of the critical infrastructure providers to see what they can do to protect their facilities from that particular threat. The other one too that I think it was sort of spoken to a little bit is insider threat. We're seeing a lot of it right now. With our firearm recognition services, we detect firearms that show up on our cameras all the time in places that you would not think. And the vast majority of them within this particular sector is some sort of insider threat. It's a domestic situation. It's a disgruntled employee. And particularly in the energy sector, I mean, these are people that have a lot of access in and out of these buildings, in and out of these facilities. These are things that I think that these guys do a great job of locking down and constantly upgrading the threat picture based on what intelligence is flowing in and out. It's sort of our job as industry to be able to respond to that and respond to the requirements and actually bring a solution to market that meets these guys' needs. So Zero Eyes is obviously trying to hold this down on the vision side of it, but obviously there's many other layers to this that the industry is trying to do.
Very good. Tony, this next question is for you, sir. Discuss some strategies the Navy has employed to address energy security gaps.
So as I said earlier, we look at energy security gaps from mission assurance assessment criteria. We're looking at what are the vulnerabilities that could happen or that exist within the installation and or the facility in being able to perform a critical mission and to carry out that mission. We look at that and evaluate it, and then we also look at the utilities. We look at the utilities and give that utility a score, and then we take that score and evaluate that, and then we assign a value to it and say, okay, is this, if it's in a red zone or a green zone or a yellow zone? And then we prioritize based on the coloring. Obviously, the reds are more critical. We need to address them first with, constrained resources. One of the other things I will share is we look at, we attempt to evaluate all of the installations based on the location they're in. We can't help for some locations. There are some locations we can do some things, and some locations we can't do certain things because, as I pointed out earlier, they're not created equal. There are some installations we have where the utility rate is much higher than what we have in Hampton Roads area. And so we can do more things with those particular installations in the Northeast than, that we might not be able to do here, like solar, for example. So we look at those things. Those are some of the strategies that we are using. We look at the mission integrity or mission index and see, okay, if this mission, is there a duplicated mission? Is there a coup operation for that? So we evaluate that potential and say, okay, can this be a duplicated effort, et cetera. So I think for the most part, we look at the mission assessment, look at the dependency of it, and then we also circle back and look at the utilities associated with it, and then make that decision, provide that risk management perspective to earmark funds to correct those missions so that we can perform the mission, we can answer the mission even amid the bad actors.
Excellent. Kieran, this next one's for you. How is technology supporting physical security of energy facilities and infrastructure right now?
Sure, yeah. So we've seen a huge push over the last 5 or 6 years for emerging technology to get sort of layered into the physical security capabilities within the energy sector. Not just with computer vision or sort of optical-based or camera-based systems. I spoke to it earlier, but counter drone is one of the biggest sort of pieces of this right now, and leads me to believe that the threat picture would seem to indicate that most people are very attuned to the threat of drones within critical infrastructure. But we're also starting to see camera-based technologies propagate these facilities. It's a lot easier to put cameras out in places than it is to man a human guard force. I think COVID put a lot of stresses on the system with the ability to sort of retain human guard force. And we've seen a shift into, can installations put sensors out where it might used to have humans? And these sensors are typically going to be some sort of camera, maybe with a radar or a LiDAR. And it's going to be looking for as much of the threat picture as possible. It's going to be looking for intrusion, so people and vehicles where they should or should not be. If your facility is located along a body of water, they're going to be looking at the maritime traffic that comes close to the facility. They're going to be looking for threat objects, firearms, or even stuff like cell phones or cameras that could could lead to some sort of espionage or cyber threat or inside threat. And these are all things that a decade ago was not possible to automate that threat detection sequence, but it's certainly possible now. And it comes with largely a fraction of the cost at what it used to be. These systems are out there. They're cheap and they're easy to maintain and operate. And I think that, largely speaking, within public safety writ large, we're going to start seeing a major shift to this kind of capability, at least here in the North American market.
Very good. Tom, you're up. In Virginia, Dominion's energy infrastructure is huge with transmission lines, power stations, and renewable generation facilities. So with all that said, how does Dominion approach physical and cybersecurity with such diverse facilities and infrastructure?
Yeah, great question. It's a bit of a lift, right? I mean, Dominion has, I want to say, 6,000 to 7,000 miles of transmission line, 60,000 miles of distribution line, many power generation stations, right? We've got offshore wind going in that's going to generate 2.6 gigawatts of power. We've got 4 nuclear plants. We've got on the horizon, possibly more than likely, I guess I could say, small modular reactors. We've got our traditional sort of combined cycle natural gas generation. We've got battery storage that, I mean, this is amazing to me, like pump storage, okay? So essentially during low peak times, water is pumped into a big reservoir, and then during peak times, it flows down through the turbines and generates electricity. It's essentially a giant battery. We've got solar. We've got renewable natural gas. I mean, you're trying to protect all that, and our security department is about 210 folks. You could add technical security integrators and guards and things of that nature. Maybe you're talking about another 500 or 600. But how do you cover down on all this? And I remember when I interviewed with a bunch of executives at Dominion nearly 6 years ago, and I sort of posed that question to them, and I posed it to myself. How do you do that? You can't have a camera on every linear foot of that transmission or distribution or natural gas pipeline or every power generation station. So you need a really robust intelligence program. So that's what Dominion at that time did, something that probably only certain size companies can do, Dominion probably being a Fortune 250 company. The first thing they did is for the first time ever, they established a chief security officer at the officer vice president level, and that was Adam Lee. You'll hear from him later this evening at a keynote address. But then he sought to build out the corporate intelligence and security team at Dominion Energy. We don't have a TV show yet, but we're hoping to get something sometime soon. But what that did, and Jonathan touched on this a little bit, is it kind of took the cybersecurity function out of IT, separated, almost like a separation of powers, if you will. Again, not a cyber guy, think roads and commodes here, but they took that cyber function, and essentially the cyber team establishes requirements for cybersecurity that the IT shop and the rest, all the business units and all the employees have to abide by and implement. Okay, and then they also run their SIMs and all the other cyber tools that they use. I mean, Dominion's network gets, we're the power company to the Pentagon, right? The Loudon server farms, many three-letter agencies. We get pinged and attacked more than probably any power company in the country. So we've got to have a really robust cybersecurity program, and having it sort of under an IT, which somebody I think in the first panel talked about that being more of an operational, it tends towards an operational focus. I think Adam and the team saw quickly that needed to be part of the security department. And then you have physical security, which is your more traditional security. We're endeavoring it to make it a much more sophisticated operation. But you needed to bring these folks together. And the best sort of physical manifestation of that is what we built out, and it's in our headquarters building down in Richmond. And it's called the TRAC, the Threat Response and Analysis Center, okay? And some of you in the room maybe have toured it. I mean, I equate it to almost like the FBI's SIOC. It's a very impressive half floor in that building. And one side is the Cybersecurity Operations Center, and the other side is the Physical Security Operations Center. And sort of in between is threat intelligence. So how can you possibly secure all of that? 178 wind turbines, 27 miles out in the ocean. Well, it takes everybody. It takes that intelligence component. It takes cyber. It takes physical security. We have a threat level in that. If cyber goes up from green to yellow, we go to yellow too on the physical security side. So we're all working together. We're singing out of that same hymnal. And then relationships, right? I mean, we cherish the relationships we have with the FBI, with CISA, with Virginia State Police, with all of our state and local officials, because we need them to help us, and they need us to help them in a lot of respects. I mean, we have our own investigative shop. We've bought a very sophisticated case management system because, I worked for the FBI. I know they got a lot on their plate. They can't be tracking every potential threat that's out there. We need to do some of that. We need to share it with them. We need to work with them. Our cyber teams do that. So those relationships they're just essential to securing the bulk electric system, and we invest in those heavily in order to do that. From a technology perspective, let me step back a minute. We talked about the things that concern us most in terms of threats. I would say certainly it's been talked a lot about today, especially nation state cybersecurity threats, the malware, the ransomware, the AI-enabled phishing, threats that are out there, that sort of thing. Taking that to the next level, really it's a simultaneous physical cybersecurity attack and physical security attack together would be a really bad day. You want to take that to the next level, having that occur during a storm or some sort of peak event that adds to the complexities. It's been touched on a little bit. Metcalf in 2013, I think it is, how that changed the industry and how the industry had sort of ramped up their efforts on hardening substations and the grid. But more recently, and you saw that in Moore County in North South Carolina, down there, some concerns there. Some of you probably saw that there was an individual and his girlfriend that were looking to shoot up a substation, I think around the Baltimore area, got caught up by the FBI. Thank you, FBI. And then more recently, an individual down in Nashville that was looking to take a drone, add a payload to it, and drop it specifically on a substation. So the idea of a simultaneous attack, with there's probably many in this room that know their way around an AR-15 or an M4, a simultaneous attack on substations, the right substations at the wrong time, is extremely concerning to me. Now take that to the next level. 10 simultaneous payload deliveries by a couple $100 drone that somebody's made into a Franken drone that could drop a payload, an explosive device on our substation. Those kind of things concern me greatly. And we're studying those things. You don't want to just kind of willy-nilly throw money at something, but we're studying it, especially on the drone side. DJ Smith with VSP's here. He'll be on the next panel. Great resource for drone detection, drone mitigation. Right now, as a critical infrastructure owner, we really can't do anything in the way of mitigation. We can detect. So we are looking at drone detection as a service. We're looking at drone mobile systems that are a little more sophisticated, that maybe utilize more than one technology to detect drones, and building out a strategy that also includes issues and advocacy, on the Hill, on our legislatures, trying to encourage our leaders to provide more authorities to our SLTT partners for drone mitigation and drone detection using different technologies. So I'll stop there. We're just some of the technologies. I think I've gone on a little bit there, but
All good. All good.
covering a lot of ground.
That's good. That's why we're here. So this next question is for the entire panel. Perhaps we could go Kieran, Tony, Tom. In each of your worlds, how should leadership think about prioritizing and funding security for our power facilities and infrastructure? Kieran?
Sure. I mean, as a vendor, we always love when there's more funding. But I think the real answer, right, is going to the advocacy piece on the Hill. I think after 9/11, we did a great job locking down key critical infrastructure. There was a ton of money available. We saw organizations like CISA get put together and given a charter to go look at both cyber and physical security. Multiple other sort of threat intelligence sharing organizations were stood up in various parts of the country by different agencies or different pieces of the federal government. The question is, are we at a point now where we need to revisit some of that? And I think the answer is yes. At least from the industry perspective, the answer is absolutely yes. From the folks that are operators and are on the ground that own the infrastructure, I think that the answer is yes. And the real question is, what is that going to look like within government? We mentioned advocacy on the Hill. ZeroEyes has a really robust Capitol Hill game, which sounds weird to say this as a small company, but realistically, we're on the bleeding edge of a bunch of different computer vision and AI capabilities. And as a small U.S. company, policymakers are always looking for U.S. companies that are sort of doing this the right way and going to market the right way. And that's given us a bit of an outsized voice on Capitol Hill. And sometimes we find ourselves testifying on issues just like this. And I think that the reality is that policymakers need re-education and constant re-education on these threat issues. And with that should come funding. I think funding right now is the biggest missing link that we see. The threat picture is rapidly evolving. Legacy technologies cannot keep up to it. Human guard forces and that kind of thing. We don't have the manpower, writ large as a nation to address some of it. And policymakers and elected officials really need to take a hard look at this and how they're going to resource it going forward.
Very good. Tony?
So, as I pointed out earlier, that's the golden question for the day. How we think about going forward. One, we have to be creative, innovative, think outside the box. We also have to partner with utility providers, at the state level, and the federal, and also the local in some cases, using IGSAs, intergovernmental service agreements. One of the things that we recognize, as is already pointed out, again, we have constrained funding. We've had constrained funding for quite some time. You probably heard in the news that we've had a backlog of requirements that need to be met, and we still don't have the funding for that. But I would just share with you, in addition to being creative, thinking outside the box, being innovative, working with partners. We can go ahead and show that slide now. This is one of the things that we have done at one of our bases in New London, and it took 10 years to come to fruition. We actually cut the ribbon in October for a microgrid at New London. So all the planning, you can see we partnered with third-party finance projects. We had enhanced use leases, working with the state of Connecticut for grants. All those partnerships are key, especially to try to get a little bit more money to do a little bit more scope, because we are constrained on what we can actually have. So going forward, as funding, I guess, gets tighter, we have to become more innovative and thinking outside the box and look at the art of the possible with what is it that we need to do and who else can participate in helping us get to where we need to go. Are
Tom?
you able to see the slide? Oh, hold on.
Control
able to see
booth,
the
are you
slide?
there?
Yeah, I want you to, I'm talking and you didn't see the slide. It's a nice pictogram anyhow, so. Is it up?
No, not yet.
It's coming.
Here
There it is.
There it is.
Okay. So there it is. You can see that, this was an innovative, out-of-the-box hybrid project that required a lot of partners. And, we cut the ribbon on last October with the governor and everybody. And that's what we have to continue to do, so.
Excellent. Tom, we've set the mood lighting. Go ahead.
That's right. Where's the wine? Where's the red wine?
That's later. That's later.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the way our leadership needs to think about their investment in protecting our infrastructure probably starts. We're a highly regulated facility or industry, as it should be, right? So our regulators, whether it's the State Corporation Commission in Virginia at the state level, or whether it's the FERC and NERC and CERC and TSA and others, sort of at the federal level, they establish requirements for us. So like at our particular facilities, they'll look at it and work with us and determine that it's a low impact, a medium impact, or a high impact facility. And there are requirements that come along with that. And that becomes the priority. The first priority is hardening those facilities in a way that's going to comply with the regulatory requirements that come along with that. Now, I have a colleague that often says compliance isn't security, and that's true. You can be compliant, you can meet the regulations. It doesn't mean you're necessarily as secure as you'd like to be. So we typically go well beyond what the requirements are to make ourselves, more and more robust in terms of hardening our assets. But that's kind of priority one, is really the regulatory, the regulated sites, which are your most critical sites, that we're gonna take care of those first. A lot of it too is just awareness. So we meet once a quarter with our regulators here in Virginia and just have a conversation with them about what we're seeing from a cybersecurity, from a physical security, from a threat intelligence perspective. So we're making them aware of what we're seeing and, throughout the year having a conversation about the things we're doing to mitigate those threats. So that's very important. So when the company goes to, because the money we spend, right? If I'm no longer a ratepayer to Dominion Energy. I pay to Rappahannock Electric Corporation. So I'm glad those guys were here. I want to talk talk to you later about an outage I had recently. If you're a Dominion Energy employee, you always get that. Can you do something about my bill? As it turns out, Dominion's rates, comparatively across the nation, are very low. Little plug for Dominion Energy there. But when you're coming forth and you're saying, hey, we need to invest in security of our infrastructure. It's expensive. There's a cost. By some estimates, we spend $100 million, in sort of an extrapolatory sense, on security at Dominion Energy. And when you're going in front of those regulators that have all of our ratepayers, concerns at heart, and as they should, you need to be able to explain to them why it is you need to do these things. And so it's incumbent on us to educate and make aware what we feel like we need to do, and we do it in a prioritized fashion. Again, it's not, from a big picture threat perspective, we use this threat review and prioritization process, but when it gets down to sort of the regulatory side for the regulated facilities, it's a whole different paradigm, something like what Tony was talking about, where we're looking at each individual substation and we're looking at those attack vectors, and we're getting down to how do we defend against a ram? The regulator might say you need to defend against an ability of an electric vehicle weighing 7,000 pounds being able to ram into your substation at this point. Well, they're not going to tell us how to do that. We'll do that on our own. But those are the kind of things they put out. They're not going to tell us where to put every camera, but we have a process that is very sophisticated, that looks at the threat, looks at the events that we've had in that area, looks at the crime index in that area, many factors in coming up with a security design around a particular aspect of our critical infrastructure. So,
Excellent, thank you. We still have a bit of time for questions, so at this point, I'd like to open it up to the audience. If you have a question, either raise your hand, stand, or make your way to a microphone. Any questions at all so far? Yes, sir.
So talking about the counter-UAS systems that we have in place, if you look at that triangle of detection, surveillance, and neutralization, those first two are pretty easy to fix with a camera. But against the policy that we have in place, how do we address the neutralization portion of that counter-UAS system?
Do you guys want to take that as the operator?
yeah, I mean, as I touched on, and I'm sure DJ Smith in the next panel could talk at length, he's very active in understanding what the laws currently are at the state level and at the federal level. I'm part of a governor's subcommittee working group to look at legislation that's out there at the state level and at the federal level. But right now, we really can't do anything as a private entity company, as a critical infrastructure owner, there's really nothing at all that we can do by law to eliminate or mitigate the drone threat. And Dominion's a company that follows not just the letter of the law, but the intent of the law, and we're not going to do anything that would put us in harm's way in that sense. Additionally, we work very closely with the FAA to enable our teams to fly, for instance, our drones beyond visual line of sight. So even as it concerns like offshore wind, right? I mean, this is something I didn't know till we kind of got into it a little bit, but there's this ADIZ zone that, military folks will understand. It goes out about 12 nautical miles. We could fly a drone in that space. Beyond that, it's governed by the ICAO treaty, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization. And you can't, the FAA's interpretation of that treaty anyway, is that we cannot fly non-type certified aircraft out there. So drones, typically commercial drones available to businesses like ours, are not type certified. That's a Cessna, a Gulfstream jet, a 737. So we can't fly out there, but we want to be able to work with the FAA to enable our teams to fly during CVOW construction, during CVOW operations. You can imagine how valuable that is to us. It's such a time saver, right? It reduces safety concerns. To have like a drone in the box at the 3 offshore substations that could launch, fly out to a turbine by a pilot that's sitting in Richmond and be able to feed that information, real-time video, into an operations center so that when they send the boat out there or the helicopter or whatever, they know what they're looking at. That's incredibly valuable to us, right? So we don't want to do anything to damage this amazing relationship we have with the FAA by doing something that, could we do it? Probably, but we want to follow the law, the intent of the law, and do it the right way. So again, it comes back to staying current on the technology, making sure we're, availing ourselves of technology that we can, and the partnerships. I will give an example. We had an incident not even a month ago where we had drones flying over one of our power generation facilities on a Friday night. By Saturday morning at 8:30, I'm on a telephone call with the Secretary of Homeland Security in the state, the Deputy Secretary, Virginia State Police, the Department of Commerce, the plant where it was at, my investigative team. By, I'd say, 11 that day, an entity in the state was redeploying their drone detection equipment to that plant on our behalf. By 2:30, it was up and running and we were detecting drones, okay? Now you say to yourself, and you think about this, and I'm sure Karen can think about, could speak this too. It's like, so what? You could detect a drone. You can't do anything about it. What difference does it make? Well, that's a valid question. It's kind of a question I asked myself over the last couple of years. But not knowing how many drones are flying over your critical infrastructure is a problem. And again, when it comes to advocacy, either at the sort of C-suite or with your regulators, you want to be able to know that kind of information, right? And I think also, to the extent drones are utilized as surveillance tools, right? One could maybe hope that before the attack occurs, they would do surveillance of some kind, perhaps using a drone before the attack occurs. And so if we were able to determine that the same uniquely identified drone had flown over this substation 3 times and this power generation station once and maybe a couple of Duke substations, well, in my old line of work, we call that a clue. And we take that and we get it to VSP, we get it to the FBI, and they use whatever, the grand jury process, and they start working upstream and figuring out what that drone is. Another thing some of these systems do, and they're passive systems, is because they can uniquely identify the drone and the operator in the control module. Say you saw a sighting over one of your critical facilities, and you've had this same uniquely identified drone out there a few times. You call your local police department, but by the time they get out there, they're out and you've got 5 acres of woods all around your facility. They can't, you don't have any way of vectoring them in to where the drone operator is. But if you have a system that could, the minute that controller goes on, it's out there and you can vector law enforcement into that location, that's helpful too. All on the, all is a process of getting hopefully to a point where at least our SLTTs can do something about drone mitigation. Sorry, I went on a little bit there.
Yeah, and I think for the Navy, yes, we get record and report them. They're instructed to report them, and then we take an assessment. But I think I would stretch that a little further to go to an instant what we are doing to some degree neutralize where you can. We have substations that are outside the fence line, and we're assessing that to develop requirements to bring those substations back inside the fence line. So where we can, we are making measures to do that. But aerial, as it's already been pointed out, it's a little bit more challenging. But where we can do it, that's what we're doing. So.
Yeah, and I think the ultimate fix is going to be regulatory action at the policymaker level to get this figured out. Just the amount of sort of slow and inefficient response times to something that could be an absolutely terribly critical threat is, I think, quickly becoming an issue on the Hill. And I think this does start at the federal level and, with FAA and PV loss waivers and all this kind of stuff. But, policymakers obviously have to be in a good place to essentially give a weapons release capability to private industry. There's obviously precedent for this. This is not like the first time the country's ever sort of had to face this type of thing before. I can tell you from the industry perspective, I think that the industry is like fully 100% behind it. I mean, the industry has created multiple different layers of counter drone defenses, everything from RF energy on the more active side to jamming on the more passive side. We even have like trained hawks to bring drones down over stadiums. If you guys have seen those, it's pretty wild. Worth a Google, I would say. So there's a plethora of capability out there. It's really going to reside with Congress and the executive agencies coming together and giving authorities to critical infrastructure where they need it the most.
Excellent. Other questions for our panel?
I will add to that I know there's, something we're exploring is going to the FAA and getting flight restrictions over certain plants. It's not, the airspace from, the grass to the atmosphere we don't own it, right? None of us own it. They obviously do that around the national capital region, et cetera. But we're exploring at least that idea of getting TFRs over certain plants, and I think other energy companies are doing something similar. I think you go back to the physical security risk and threat. Metcalf happened, the industry changed. I hope something like that doesn't happen before we can, sort of get our act together across the spectrum to afford SLTTs. The federal folks and critical infrastructure owners the ability to do more. So,
A question in the back?
Yes, thank you guys for being here today. I want to return to the point that you made about how compliance isn't necessarily security and how you have to go on kind of like your own individual path to get the security that you think is necessary. And I feel like based on just kind of what I've heard today and from people I've talked to, that this has a lot to do with the fact that there's not really a national or a federal framework for the kinds of technologies we have in order to protect them. And so kind of a twofold question for this. Number one being, do you think having federal regulations and frameworks in place to kind of standardize our security across the board, both physical and cyber, would be a good idea, or would that cause more problems if it's all federally kind of regulated? And secondly, if you do think that there needs to be more of a standard across the board, how do we get people in office who don't necessarily understand the technologies or the importance of them to implement such regulation?
Whoever would like to take that first, please feel free.
I think I made the comment about compliance not being, and I think that, okay, Tony, do you have something?
Yeah, you can go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't really speak too much to the cyber side of things, but at least on the physical side, there is a standard. I mean, that's what the FERC and the NERC and the CERC, I mean, they are establishing, you can call it a standard, you call it requirements, but those are requirements that we have to follow. And then they have a cadence of inspections where they come out and they meet with us, and we have to provide them evidence for how we determined what our methodology was for how we decided to harden and protect this particular facility. And they'll go out, and many of the folks, several of the folks on our team that do that sort of physical security compliance work are at the conference today. And that's what they do. They'll go out with those inspectors from FERC, and they'll give them tours of, not all of our substations, for instance, or all of our plants, but they'll go out there and they'll have folks on those inspection teams that'll look at it. And I think Jonathan touched on this. It's like, there's a hill over here. You can see right over that, that's a really pretty beta fence you have there that provides obstructive qualities and some ballistic qualities. But you can, from that hill, or if you climb that tree, you can shoot right down into that substation. So we take that to heart, and we say, okay, well, by the next time you come here, we might have a concrete barrier wall that goes up a few feet higher in front of the oil reservoir, and those oil reservoirs are used to cool the substation. There's other technology, like you can put a float switch in there or something that's saying, hey, something's going on, the oil's leaking out of the reservoir, let's slowly kind of take this one offline before you burn out the transformer, because I think it was somebody from REC noted those transformers in the substations could have a 18 to 24 month lead time. Now, we're pretty careful as a company to have mobile substations, to have many transformers, in very secure facilities to have that resiliency we need if something like that were to happen. But it's a pretty robust, rigorous process that we have teams, that's kind of all they do on the physical security side. Now with drones, again, back to drones, I think it's one of these things, and I think our legislature struggled on the cyber side, is the technology always outpaces the legislation and even the ability of your average legislator or your average American, I think, to understand that technology. So I think that's going to be kind of a constant, again, campaign of awareness and education, et cetera, with all of our leaders. I don't know if that helped at all, but.
Yeah, and I would just add that, as you pointed out, I think we have measures in place. When I say we at the installation, there are physical security. So you have to look at the access points, the exterior and then the interior. There are security measures and protocol in place. Obviously, for the outside gate or outside fence, there are measures. You can't put a steel cage and say, that would be too costly, or concrete barrier that said don't come in. But again, there are security, physical security. Again, it's about that marrying physical with the cyber. And I don't know if you're able to codify that federally, because in my point, every facility or every installation will be treated a little differently, and just like every facility. And so, you just have to be, I think, mindful of that, because you're going to then increase your cost to do that. And then right now, we're already constrained with being able to maintain what we actually have. So those are some trade-offs, and that's why I go back to that managing that risk assessment and just to be aware of it. So.
Karen, do you want to add anything? So all I would add is, on the cyber side of things, there are regulatory frameworks that exist, some of which have the force of law and some of which do not. So there's a disparity here. For example, within the U.S. Department of Defense, there are robust cybersecurity controls and standards that are in place, which defense contractors themselves also have to adhere to. However, within private industry, cybersecurity standards are largely voluntary. One great resource, if you aren't familiar with it already, is NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology's Cybersecurity Framework, or CSF. This is a great voluntary compliance framework that NIST has put together and published online, and it is aimed at everybody, including the private sector. And a lot of firms, for example, within financial services, are now looking specifically to NIST guidance to ensure that their cybersecurity measures are up to scratch. So the picture is very mixed. And I would add that adding the force of law to this, going from voluntary compliance to regulatory compliance to law, introduces a whole host of challenges that I'm not paid enough to navigate. We have time for maybe one last rather quick question. Otherwise, we can dismiss early. No pressure. Okay. If there are no further questions, please join me in thanking our panel. We have a planned break from now until 4:30, so please return to your seats by 4:30 for our fourth panel of the day, Emerging Opportunities and Threats, AI, Drones, and Other Technologies. See you then.